So far, in our exploration of how the mind grows, we've talked about a lot of different philosophies and models and ways of looking at things. But here's a surprisingly useful tool for understanding developmental psychology: The Breakfast Club. This video, by the way, will contain Breakfast Club spoilers. That classic 80s movie about a band of teenagers stuck in detention one fateful Saturday morning. Do they do Saturday detentions anymore? That was never a thing in my school. That was crazy, the idea that kids would come in on a weekend for detention. You got the hoodlum, the jock, the nerd, the princess, and the so-called basket case, and at first they're all salty and standoffish with each other because, let's face it, American high schools are sort of a breeding ground for that kind of thing. But as the day progresses, they start to open up and share things and have a little fun by way of a dance montage. And at some point they each kind of crack, revealing something very important about adolescence in the process, which is the struggle between the need to stand out and the need to belong. All these kids feel tremendous pressure to maintain their image in their particular group, in part because there's just some security in belonging to a group, even if that group gets picked on by another group. And so they wear the corresponding diamond earrings, combat boots, letterman's jackets, and spectacles, and act how their roles dictate. But the thing is, none of those kids are satisfied with their outward identities. Instead, they're all stuck in the classic teenage struggle, one that German psychoanalyst Erik Erikson, yes, his name is actually Erik Erikson, called the crisis between identity and role confusion. In other words, their newly forming identities were at odds with other people's expectations of what roles they should play. Hence the confusion. The past couple of weeks we've been talking about childhood as a crucial period of growth, learning, and change, and it definitely is, but anyone who's ever seen a John Hughes movie knows that there's way more to growing up than just that. And I got some news for you. From adolescence into adulthood and into old age, the drama of your personal psychological development never ceases. Never. So get used to it.
You'll need to finish that video clip and open Socrative and answer the questions there that correspond with the rest of Teen Adolescence Crash Course. Today we're going to talk about Module 51, which is adolescence and your physical and cognitive development during that stage. So many psychologists believe that they used to believe that childhood kind of set your traits, that you revealed everything that you were going to be when you were a child. But today's developmental psychologists see development as lifelong. As this lifespan perspective emerged, psychologists began to look at how maturation and experience shape us, not only in infancy and childhood, but also in adolescence and beyond. Your story is still being written. So adolescence, the years spent morphing from child to adult, starts with the physical beginnings of sexual maturity and ends with the social achievement of independent adult status. In some cultures, where teens are self-supporting, it really doesn't exist. Adolescence doesn't really exist. A psychologist named G. Stanley Hall in 1904 was one of the first to actually describe this idea of adolescence. He believed that the tension between biological maturity and your social dependence creates this period of storm and stress. And for many people, they look back at this time period, after they are more established, and they think this was a really difficult time and they don't want to relive it again. There are other people who feel like without the cares of adulthood, that teenage years are a time of really rewarding friendships and heightened idealism and a growing sense of exciting possibilities. So some people look back at it with real fondness, but for those that it wasn't so easy, I'm not so sure that that's the way they view it. I know that I would not want to repeat my adolescent years. Physical development. So adolescence begins with puberty, the time when we mature sexually, and puberty follows a surge of hormones which may intensify moods and trigger a series of bodily changes. Some girls start their growth spurt at about 9 years old, some boys as late as 16. There's lots of variations. Those variations have little effect on height at maturity. They may have psychological consequences. It is not only when we mature that counts, but how people respond to their physical development. So a little bit about early maturation. For boys who who mature early, it has mixed effects. Boys who are stronger and more athletic during their teen years tend to be more popular, self-assured, and independent, though also more at risk for alcohol use, delinquency, and premature sexual activity. For girls, early maturation can be a challenge. If a young girl's body and hormone-fed feelings are out of sync with her emotional maturity and her friend's physical development and experiences, she might begin associating with older adolescents or may suffer teasing and sexual harassment. Adolescents' brain is also a work in progress. Until puberty, brain cells increase their connections, like trees growing more roots and branches, but during adolescence comes a selective pruning process of unused neurons and connections. So what you don't use, you start to lose. As teens mature, their frontal lobes also continue to develop. The growth of myelin, the fatty tissue that forms around axons and speeds neurotransmission, which you've already learned about, which enables better communication with other brain regions, starts to be affected. And these developments bring improved judgment, impulse control, and long-term planning. Maturation of the frontal lobes nevertheless lags behind that of the emotional limbic system. Puberty's hormonal surges and limbic system development helps explain teens' occasional impulsiveness, some riskier behaviors, sometimes emotional storms. All of that is normal. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about reasoning power and cognitive development, and Piaget, who you're already familiar with, and Lawrence Kohlberg. During the early teen years, reasoning is often self-focused. Adolescents may think their private experiences are unique, something that other people just can't understand. Capable of thinking about their own thinking and about other people's thinking, they also begin imagining what others are thinking about them. And I think this idea, combined with new technologies like social media, have had a really they've made life difficult for this generation. Because not only are you moving through that cognitive developmental cycle, but you have this added layer of social media and all that that brings to the table. When adolescents achieve their intellectual summit, Jean Piaget calls that formal operations. They apply their new abstract reasoning tools to the world around them, and they might think about what is ideally possible and compare with the imperfect reality of their society or their situation or their parents or even themselves. They might debate human nature, good and evil, truth and justice. So this is a time when you're really seeking what you understand to be right. Reasoning hypothetically and deducing consequences also enable adolescents to detect inconsistencies. You guys are great at spotting hypocrisy, and it bothers you. This is Lawrence Kohlberg, and he studied Piaget's theories and then adjusted them slightly for his self. Developing morality. So two crucial tasks of childhood and adolescence are discerning right from wrong and developing character, the psychological muscles for controlling impulses. To be a moral person is to think morally and act accordingly. Jean Piaget and Lawrence Kohlberg proposed that moral reasoning guides moral actions. Piaget, 1932, believed that children's moral judgments build on their cognitive development. Now, agreeing with Piaget, Lawrence Kohlberg, who is much more recent, like the 1980s, sought to describe the development of moral reasoning, the thinking that occurs as we consider what is right and what is wrong. Kohlberg proposed a bunch of moral dilemmas and asked children, adolescents, and adults whether actions were right or wrong. He then analyzed their answers for evidence and stages of their moral thinking, and he came up with his own theory. His findings led him to propose three basic levels of moral thinking: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Kohlberg claimed that these levels form a moral ladder. The things in lavender are pre-conventional, light blue is conventional, and light The lightest color at the bottom, like green or light gray, whatever you want to call that, is post-conventional. He believes that some people never actually reach the post-conventional, these post-conventional areas here. I'm going to show you this in another chart form. So the pre-conventional morality is like up through age 9 or so. Of course, these are all loose because people develop. There's a range of development for people. But generally speaking, pre-conventional morality is based upon self-interest. It's narcissistic, it's selfish, it's trying to avoid being punished, it's thinking about only, yourself. Okay? You avoid breaking the rules so that you can gain something in return. Conventional morality, early adolescence, is really about social approval, maintaining social order. So it's about figuring how to fit in and how other people are viewing you. So pretty much high school, it's about this conventional morality stage. What you guys are working on in this class and in some of the other upper end classes is just post-conventional morality, starting to think outside of yourself and even larger than like even our government, but thinking about like what's right on a global scale, thinking about things like human rights and what does it mean to be alive and who has the right to take that from people. I mean, those are operating on the post-conventional morality realm. And I'm pleased that you guys are there because some people never get there. So we spent some time in class looking at ethical dilemmas like, who are you going to kick out of a lifeboat if you can only save a certain number of people or things like that. And that's the sort of thing Kohlberg would do. If this strikes a chord with you, this is like, post-conventional morality kicking in. Just thinking about right and wrong and under what circumstances are you okay with this, and are there any circumstances in which you're okay with what you're seeing right now? Last for today, moral intuition. Moral intuition. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt believes that much of our morality is rooted in moral intuitions. These are just quick gut feelings or effectively latent intuitions. They're just like how we feel immediately in a situation. According to this view, the mind makes moral judgments as it makes aesthetic judgments, quickly and automatically. We feel disgust when we see people engaged in degrading behavior or subhuman acts. Even a disgusting taste in our mouth heightens when we get really disgusted over moral digressions. We feel elevation, a tingly, warm, glowing feeling when we see people displaying exceptionally generous or compassionate or courageous action. These feelings in turn trigger moral reasoning, said Haidt. So one of the ways that Haidt and his team study moral intuition is to give scenarios like this. Imagine seeing a runaway trolley headed for 5 people. All are going to be killed unless you throw a switch that diverts the trolley onto another track where it's going to kill 1 person. Should you throw the switch? Most people in this scenario, as the studies go anyway, say yes. Kill 1, you're going to save 5. But then, now imagine the same dilemma, except that your opportunity to save the 5 requires that you push a large stranger onto the tracks where he will die as his body stops the trolley. Kill 1, save 5. The logic is the same, but in that instance, people say no, because they were the active participant in the killing. Our moral thinking and feelings surely affect our moral talk, but sometimes talk is cheap and emotions are fleeting. Morality involves doing the right thing, and what we do also depends on social influences. Today's character education programs tend to focus on whole moral package, thinking, feeling, and doing the right thing. They also teach children empathy for others' feelings.